Hey everybody, it's Costa. My guest today is Blair DuQuesnay. Blair is an advisor at Ritholtz Wealth Management, where she also sits on the investment committee. She holds a CFA and CFP certifications and is a board member of her local CFA society in Louisiana. She writes a blog called The Southern Belle and contributes to major financial news outlets. We've got a great episode for you, so stay tuned. Can you start off today and talk a little bit about your background and how you got from kind of graduating college and where you are today?
Yeah, that's a very long question, and I could probably take up your entire podcast answering that. But the abbreviated version is that I majored in finance at the University of Georgia, and I went. The only online way to search for jobs back then was called monster.com, and I went on an interview in downtown Atlanta for an institutional job and rode down the elevator with a broker, a financial advisor, who asked me why I was there and ended up asking me to come back and interview with him. And so I was hired into wealth management at a brokerage firm. After a year in Atlanta, I had always wanted to move to New York City, so I asked for a transfer, and I did transfer up to New York, where I had a front row seat for the great financial crisis. My building, I worked for UBS. My building backed up to Lehman Brothers in Times Square. I literally watched them nervously walking around on the second floor, leaving in boxes. So that was kind of a wild ride. And the worst thing that ever happened to me was that I was laid off from the brokerage firm in like the 10th round of the great financial crisis, and landed at a registered investment advisor firm called Wealthstream Advisors in New York. And that was the first time that I learned about working as an advisor rather than, in a brokerage firm. And so, like my CEO, Josh Brown at Ritholtz Wealth Management, I too am a reformed broker. And then my story takes an interesting turn. I fell in love with a man from New Orleans. And so I'm about to celebrate my 10th anniversary living down here in New Orleans. And I had a couple of twists and turns where I started my own advisory firm, working with younger clients, doing financial planning and investments, was hired by a local advisory firm in New Orleans to be their chief investment officer briefly. And then I moved to Ritholtz Wealth Management because I was looking to join a firm that was growing fast. And they were the ones. I had met Josh Brown. We were on the same 40 under 40 list for investment news. We would see each other when we were both speaking at conferences. And around the time I was considering making a career move, he wrote a blog about his failure to hire women advisors in his firm. And we started talking that day, and I joined the firm 2 months later. So I guess what I'm saying is there's not necessarily a traditional way to make it in wealth management. Sometimes it's a very long and winding road. But essentially, I started in wealth management, and here I am 16, 17 years later as a financial advisor.
Awesome. So let's kind of rewind a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about why you took an interest in finance in college. Was that something that you kind of always felt like you wanted to do, or was it just sort of like, oh, you saw an article or one of those type of deals?
Okay, so I entered college as a dance major. I was a classically trained ballerina, and I started out solely majoring in dance. And in my sophomore year, I decided I should probably get a second major, since I was at a university and paying college tuition and all of the rest. So I started majoring in business, but I didn't know exactly what field in business I wanted. And in Accounting 101, this is the nerdiest story ever, but in Accounting 101, they taught me about time value of money and the fact that compounding and it makes more money that you make makes more money. And the light bulb went off, and I said, this is interesting. I want to study finance. And so the rest is history.
Awesome. That's not a nerdy story at all. So I think everybody should be interested in time value of money for sure. So let's talk a little bit about a different topic here. So obviously you're an advisor with Ritholtz. You sit on the investment committee. You write a blog. You contribute to major news outlets. You're also a past president and you're a current board member of the CFA Society of Louisiana. And you're also active with an organization that works to reform and renew Louisiana. And you're a mother. So my question is, number one, why do you have an interest in doing all those different things? And then number two, how do you kind of balance all of them and prioritize the different roles that you are involved in?
Yeah, I think I get the community aspect from my mother. I always saw her volunteering and giving back in the community. She was always a good board member and president of several boards. So that was really instilled in me. And then the work ethic I get from my father. I mean, I saw him wake up before the sun came up every day and go to work, and still doing that, to this day. So I have a little bit of both of them, and I just couldn't get either of it out of me. So I enjoy my work. I enjoy being an advisor and helping clients solve the financial puzzles in their life and the relationships that come from that. But I also enjoy the numbers and learning about new investment strategies and what are the best ways to implement strategies for our clients in a tax efficient manner. What are we going to do now with low interest rates? All of those questions really resonate with sort of the analytical thinking side of my brain. So I've always done both. That's why I have both a CFA charter and a CFP, Certified Financial Planning designation. And I've always done both. I never just was able to choose one. I think when I walked onto the research floor at the brokerage firm and it was silent like a library, a part of me loved it, but I knew I could never sit there every single day, 5 days a week, that I would have to also be interacting with people. I waited long time to get married and to have children. So, that's been the latest challenge for me. I look at it as the next, step in life. I'm just going to overcome it just like everything else. But now that I have children, I wonder why I waited so long. They're wonderful. They're a lot of work, but they're also wonderful. Even before the pandemic forced everybody to work from home, I actually chose to move home right before the birth of my second daughter in February. So I was a month ahead of everybody. But being a financial advisor gives me that flexibility. Before we started recording this podcast, I was sitting with my daughter on my lap for another Zoom call that was not work related. So it's a new world. We're able to combine all of these things and, put the baby down for a nap right before a client review call. And that's a wonderful thing. We're really lucky to be living in these times.
No, absolutely. And I think that we actually spoke with Ben Carlson recently, and he said the same thing about the flexibility, and especially with Ritholtz, them allowing you guys to kind of work from home even before the pandemic. So, so another question I kind of have about all these different roles is how do they all kind of contribute to your sort of main career of being an advisor and working at Ritholtz?
Yeah, I think a lot of us at the firm are writers, and we write to help us formulate our thoughts. So if there was no blog, I think Barry Ritholtz would still get up every morning and write, right? And so for me, writing is something I've always enjoyed. I've written before I joined the firm. I used to write the quarterly newsletter at one of my firms. I've written in the corporate voice. So I think writing would always be a part of who I am, even if it wasn't on a blog. And so it's very easy to just copy and paste and publish all of that on a blog if I think other people might be interested in reading it. So that's just a way of formulating thoughts. Giving back to my community, I guess I don't like to use the term personal brand. I think before that it was just reputation, right? Reputation is very important. And I care about where I'm living and the people who live around me and making it a better place. And so I look for ways that I can use my skills to give back. And mostly it's giving of my time. But I don't think that will be something that ever ceases for me. I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of wonderful people that I would not meet through work by doing civic work. And so I think what you're seeing is just a manifestation of all of the parts of me. And that's another wonderful thing about the way work is today. We don't have to go work for a corporation for 35 years and be a cog in a wheel anymore. Everybody can be themselves if they're lucky enough to land at the right firm.
Absolutely. So let's touch a little bit about something that you mentioned. You mentioned that you hold the CFP and CFA designations. And for our listeners, just really quick, the CFP is the Certified Financial Planner, and then the CFA is the Chartered Financial Analyst. And you mentioned that the CFA is a little bit more research focused, a little bit more investment focused, I guess. So you said that you kind of chose both because you couldn't choose one. And I want to kind of dive into a little bit about what the main differences were in your experience studying and taking exams and eventually receiving those designations, and then what kind of strategies you had for completing each one.
Yeah, so I did the CFA first. And CFA, I haven't taken the bar. I haven't gone to medical school. I haven't taken the accounting exam, but I've been told that it's harder than any of those. So it's very rigorous. If you take what you learn in your finance classes and what you would learn if you did an MBA with a specialty in finance and wrap all of that into a series of exams, plus more information about what it's like to be a professional and be ethical and all of these things and live in and be a part of a global profession trying to make the investing world better for society. So I registered for level 1 of the CFA exam about a year and a half after I graduated from college, and I was working at a brokerage firm. It was suggested to me by a man that I worked with at the time. So thank you, Ed from Scarsdale, for suggesting it. I used the books that my boyfriend at the time had used to take it the year before, so I only paid for the exam. I started studying in January for a June exam, and you just got to go for it. You got to put in the hours. It's really, really rigorous. And then at the time, you could take a test once a year in June. So if you failed, you had to wait a full year to take it again. They started offering level 1 in December and in June. I never got into the December rotation. So then level 2 comes around, and it's even harder. It's level 1 is a speed test. It's a lot of questions, single topics. Level 2 is multi-question problem sets. And it's the one where most people drop out. I put in the hours and I passed it. And so then level 3 came around, and my job was very demanding. I had a manager at the brokerage firm who wanted me to be in at 7:15 every morning. I'm not a morning person. It was not a good fit for me. And he also wanted me to stay until 6 or 7 at night. So I didn't have the time, and I failed it. And I had to take level 3 a year later, a second time. But the CFA charter has become so much more to me than some tests that I passed or letters that became behind my name, because I've volunteered and I've been the president of my local society. I have met fellow charter holders from literally almost every country in the world by going to global conferences. It's really amazing to meet people who do exactly what you do, who are a lot like you, who are from every stretch of the globe. That's an amazing thing to know that you're part of a global profession. After that, I was working at WealthStream Advisors, and they did financial planning very seriously, and they suggested that I take the CFP. CFP is a very broad mix of topics that you would need to help somebody with a financial plan, and that includes investments, tax, insurance, estate planning, all of these topics that you would need to help a family decide, what they need to do with all areas of their finances. So I was able to skip the education component of the CFP because of my CFA and just study for and take the test. And I did that in about 6 months, but I will tell you, it's not that CFP is easier. It's not as rigorous, but it's broad. And so it was really hard for me to make sure that I got all of the data in. I mean, I was flipping flashcards until literally the moment before I took the test. I probably use CFP more, information more in my job as an advisor than I do CFA. And so I think both are really amazing, powerful. They're credentials that have teeth, right? There's a lot of letters out there, and some of them don't have many requirements. CFP also requires ongoing continuing education, and CFA requires, annual renewal and commitment to the ethics that are behind the standard. So to anybody considering either of these, neither are easy. They're going to require a lot of time and attention, but they can both take you to wonderful places in your career.
Absolutely. I think most of our listeners are probably going to attempt the CFP, but I think the CFA, like you said, it's got teeth and it's sort of the gold standard for industry. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the op-ed that you wrote, I think about a year ago in January in the New York Times, and it kind of talked a lot about the lack of female representation in the industry, and I think the title is consider firing your mail broker or something like that. So if anyone would like to read it, we'll link to it as well. But so what I want to talk about is what would you kind of recommend to young women who might be considering a career in financial advising, but are maybe nervous about, oh, I don't see many role models that look like me. How can they be successful?
First of all, if they're considering it, that's a win, because where we're losing is that young women are not hearing about the career. Like you said, there aren't a lot of visible women who are advisors that they would see. You got to see it to believe it. So first of all, thank you for considering it as a career. And I'm glad that you got there, however it came to you, because, we need to get the word out. Getting from the path from undergraduate to advisor, there's no shortcut, whether you're a man or a woman. You got to get the experience of being in the room with a client. We're talking to people about their money, their life savings. It's emotional. It's a lot of things all wrapped into one. So the ability to interact with people is only a learned skill. So, be patient. Try to get that first job with an advisor or a firm that you'll be able to learn from, that you're going to be doing grunt work at first, and that's okay. I never knew that the skill of knowing how to bind presentations would be useful, but let me tell you, when you start your own advisory firm, there's no one else to bind the presentations for you. So in my first year as a sales assistant at a brokerage firm, we had a lot of clients that were institutions, 401k plans, pension plans, and the advisors would go to these board meetings with 13 board members, 15 board members, and I'd be in the back the night before binding all of those copies of the presentations. So don't be afraid of the grunt work, but make sure that you're somewhere where you can learn. And you may not even be invited to sit in front of the client in your first couple of years, and that's okay too. You're going to be talking to them on the phone. I'll never forget, my first week on the job at UBS, there was a client. He was some sort of .com firm founder, and he needed to wire money to buy a piece of property. I didn't know what a Fed fund wire was or how to enter it, and I just had these mix of information, and this is like $4 million that needed to get to a bank account that day, and the pressure was on, and I was figuring out, and the ops team was trying to teach me how to do it, and I had to jump through hoops to get it done, and it was very stressful. But just even if you're just talking to a client on the phone about scheduling an appointment, or this little menial things, that learning how to deal with people is very important. It's a very big part of the job that I think a lot of students may overlook. They're focused on the topics and the number skills, but you've got to focus on that as well, which is great if you're a woman, because women stereotypically are good at that. They're good at listening. They're good at having empathy. So that's why this is a job that is great for men and women, but especially for women. You might be getting a little bit of background noise with my 8-month-old baby, this work from home Zoom life here, but it will give you autonomy over your time. If you become a senior advisor, you will choose, what times you're going to offer to meet with your clients. It doesn't mean that you're not going to work hard if you have enough clients, but you're not going to have to report into work, at a certain time every day and clock out at another time. So there's a work-life balance. And it's a stable income. So it's nice. There's no longer the eat what you kill sales culture mentality in the brokerage firms. It used to be they would give you a phone book. You go and you take your Series 7, which is the license to be a registered representative at a broker-dealer firm. And then they give you some sales training, no investments training. And then they tell you to prospect. That's no longer the case. Now there are firms that will take you in as a junior planner and allow you to train and learn those skills. So to all the women out there that are considering this career, don't be afraid of the hard work. The men know they can't act like they used to anymore, so that's okay. You don't have to worry about that, and just go for it.
Absolutely. So then kind of another question I had building off of that are, what kinds of resources are out there for maybe young women that would like to break into the field, if there are any?
Yeah, I wish there were more, to be honest. So a friend of mine, Nina O'Neill, started the Female Advisor Network. And she's working on, a network for young women who are not yet an advisor, right? They might be in a support role. And hopefully that will come online soon. I would just say that search for mentors and, more importantly, sponsors in your workplace. You can't force someone to mentor. It's just a relationship that forms. So just look to form relationships with people who you think can help in your career and who you can learn from. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask someone to sit down for coffee. Just, find your network. Luckily with social media, we have ways of connecting with other advisors. I mean, I've met so many other advisors through Twitter that I never, would have met before. So don't be afraid to reach out. It might take some, if you're cold emailing someone, don't worry if they don't respond to you within one day. They're busy, but hopefully they will get back to you. And don't be afraid to reach out again if you don't hear back, because people are busy. And don't take it personal if that happens. But do reach out to people.
Absolutely. So just one more question I had here before we wrap up is just a little bit more about you. So just like, what are some things you like to do outside of work? Why, and then how do they kind of contribute to your life and as an advisor, if at all?
Yeah, so I told you I was a ballet dancer, and so that idea of using my full body in a discipline has always been a part of my life, and that kind of morphed into yoga. And so I have a yoga practice. I wish I went more often, but having young children, it's very difficult. But I would love to start every day before work with that yoga practice. And even though it's crazy stuff like doing forearm stands and back bends and standing up from back bends, stuff I never thought I would do, it's a clarity. It's a moving meditation. It sets the intention for the day. It clears the junk out of my mind. Because, even when I'm laying in bed, watching television, getting ready to go to sleep, I could check that email from a client. It's really hard to turn off. And so that ability to clear the mind for an hour, hour and a half in the morning is very important. And I think it's also important, that as you get older, that you maintain mobility and flexibility in your joints. I think that's really important. So a lot of times when I'm doing crazy, like putting my leg behind the head, I'm like, my clients should be glad that I'm doing this torture to myself in the morning, because it's making me a better advisor. In addition to that, when I don't have an 8-month-old baby and a 3.5-year-old son, and one day I will move past this part of my life, but I love to read. I love everything from Harry Potter novels to, business memoirs and everything in between. History, I love to learn about history. If I had all the time in the world, I would read a lot more history. So, reading is important. And when there's not a pandemic going on, live music is a really big part of what I do. I just, performance in general, I think is a very special thing, the relationship between the performer and the audience, and just going and being able to decompress and listen to live music, I think is just very healing. And so I can't wait till that resumes again, because that's probably, besides travel, the biggest thing that I miss right now during COVID-19.
Absolutely. I think it's great that you have so many different interests outside of work. I think it helps, like you said, just decompress and keep your mind off of different things and engaged. So this was great. This was awesome. I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of time at the end here for any other comments, maybe something that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to, or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope that this has been helpful. I really enjoy engaging with students It doesn't seem like so long ago that I was, contemplating what I was going to do with my career. And I would just say be open to the fact that you might not be able to plan what's going to happen as you move along in your career, but in hindsight, you will see that everything is happening for a reason. So I all the time talk about the fact that I started as a sales assistant, and I was very bitter about that at first. But because I knew all the mechanics of opening accounts, of servicing, clients from that perspective rather than having started as an advisor, I was able to start my own firm when I relocated to New Orleans, and I could do all of those jobs. So just be patient. And I know that's hard because I was the most impatient 20-something-year-old ever. But the time does pass and you will get to where you are supposed to be. I actually was just listening. I was invited to a JP Morgan Women in Business event last week, and Oprah spoke, and she talked about the author and spiritualist Eckhart Tolle. And I need to read this because he's talked about you will receive the experience in life that you need to mold you into the person that you're supposed to become. And she said that actually, as a society right now, that's what we're getting with pandemic, is that maybe we all needed to stop for a minute and reflect. So, not to get all spiritually on you, business and finance majors, but just know that everything happens for a reason. And the people who start out of the gate with the greatest job that you might be thinking, you're a little jealous of, your time may come later, and that can be a great thing.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank you again, Blair. This was great. I'm sure we provide a lot of value and insight into the industry, especially like we were talking about for younger women who are looking to get into it. Thanks again. It was great.
Thank you for having me. A real pleasure.
Hello, everyone. This is Vincent Picillo, producer of the MSU WMA podcast, where we are inspiring and educating the next generation of financial planners. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please check out our channel on all platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and check out our social media at MSU WMA and MSUWMA.com.